So I know some of you are expecting pyrotechnics or the Rolling Stones to come out or something big and wow and large, but you just stuck with me today. So I want to begin very simply. Very sweet little mice, a little story, a little joke if you laugh, I guess, but if not, it still stands. A man comes into his rabbi's office and says, "Rabbi, not leaving here until you make me a Kohen." The rabbi says, "I'm sorry, I guess you don't understand how it works." Man says, "I don't care how it works. I will write a check to the rabbi's discretionary fund. I will contribute to the Lev initiative. I don't care what it takes. I'm not leaving here until you make me a Kohen." The rabbi says, "I'm just curious, why do you want to be a Kohen so badly?" To which the man says, "Look, I'm an underachiever in my family. I'm the black sheep. My older brother's a Kohen. My father's a Kohen. My grandfather's a Kohen. Make me a Kohen." That's not how it works. And you know that's not how it works. You're born a Kohen, right? You're born a Kohen or one of the Levim, the Levites, my peeps, or the Yisraelim, the Israelites, right? The Jews in the pews. We're born into it. It's not a choice. It's something that we're born into. But we think it's a ladder to heaven, right? That's how we think of it. We think the Kohen, somehow is a little bit closer to God, gets better discounts at Judaica stores, right? Learns this ability, has this ability, God-given, the sign of the Kohen. There's nothing holier about being a Kohen. In this day and age, all you get is first Aliyah, and normally we can't give away the Aliyot. It's really nothing special in this day and age, and frankly, wasn't all that special way back when. But we do this. And as Jews, we have these ladders that we build all the time. I hear it, even if it's not articulated specifically, in regards to modern Judaism and our movements. I mean, many people describe Judaism as Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Ultra-Orthodox, Chabad, and God, right? That's the ladder that we have concocted in our heads. If you do more, and if you climb higher, and if you have more facial hair and darker clothes, a black hat, and do more mitzvahs, right, then you're a better Jew and you're closer to God. We do this as Jews in our secular lives as well. There are all kinds of ways we do it, but here's a little Maisa, little story, hopefully a joke, that one day becomes true. The first Jewish man, the first Jew is elected president. And he wants, of course, his mother to come to the swearing-in ceremony. And he says, "Mama, right, come to my swearing-in ceremony." And she says, I wouldn't know what to wear. And he says, "I'm the president. I'll have a dressmaker show up at your house. We'll make you a nice dress. I keep kosher. Mom, I'll be the president, right? We'll turn the White House into a kosher kitchen. I don't know how I'll get there. Mom, I'll send Air Force One. You're coming. The day of the swearing-in the ceremony arrives, and there she is, sitting between a future cabinet member and a Supreme Court justice, and she nudges the man to her right, and she says, you see that man up there?" And the Supreme Court justice says, "Of course, that's the newly elected president." She says, "Uh-huh, and his brother's a doctor." Because as Jews, just above President of the United States is my son, the doctor, my granddaughter, in this day and age, the CEO, my grandson, the investment banker. We do this. We have these ladders of success in our religious lives and in our professional lives and definitely in our educational lives. We Jews are obsessed with education. Rightly so. It's a great thing. 90% of Jewish kids go to college. It's a staggering statistic, but it's not without a shadow side. Like the time a B'nai Mitzvah family showed up to meet with me, didn't know them from Adam. They showed up with a stack of papers and handed them to me. This is the first encounter we ever had. And I started to look and realized it was grade 7 report card, grade 6 report card, all the way down to preschool with little happy faces and stars on it. They were there to show me straight A's. They were there to talk about a career, and I'm here to talk about character. This kid was Ivy League or bust. Is it me, the schlepper from Nebraska that doesn't know from Ivy League or these fancy schools out here of names I forget? Is it every kid today going to an Ivy League school or applying to an Ivy League school? And how many grandparents stop me and say, "Rabbi, my grandson is magna cum laude, my granddaughter summa cum laude, or hakuna matata, or it's just Greek, it's Latin, I don't know. I graduated top 80%, do the math, of my class, the University of Kansas. Not all of us are going to Harvard, my friends. Not all of us can be doctors. Not all of us can occupy the top rung. Some of us are going to be middle rung. Some of us are going to be bottom rung. Some of us are not going to be on a rung. We'll be on a different ladder altogether. And this is what was kind of sparked within me last spring at a commencement speech that took place in Newton, Massachusetts, at Newton High School. It was given by world-famous author David McCullough Jr., and he shocked the community, and he shocked the internet. I think I see Wendy nodding. I think she emailed me the email of it, the words of it, and here's part of the text. The empirical evidence is everywhere. Even an English teacher, this English teacher, can't ignore, he wrote. Newton, Natick, Needham, that has to be 2,000 high school graduates right there, give or take, and that's just the N neighborhoods across greater Boston. Across the country, there are no fewer than 3.2 million seniors graduating. That's about 37,000 high schools. That means there are 37,000 valedictorians, 37,000 class presidents, 92,000 harmonizing altos, 340,000 swaggering jocks, and 2,185,967 pairs of Uggs. 520, no, sorry, wrong side. But why limit ourselves to high school? After all, you're leaving it, he says. So think about this. Even if you're 1 in a million on a planet of 6.8 billion, you're still only one. And consider for a moment the bigger picture, your planet. I'll remind you, your planet is not the center of the solar system. Your solar system is not the center of the galaxy. Your galaxy is not the center of the universe. In fact, astrophysicists assure us there is no center of the universe, therefore you cannot be it. And neither can Donald Trump. Somebody needs to tell him as much, although his hair is quite a phenomenon. But Dave, you cry. Dave, Walt Whitman says, I'm my own version of perfect. And Epictetus tells me I have the spark of Zeus. And I don't disagree, says McCullough. So that makes 6.8 billion examples of perfection, 6.8 billion sparks of Zeus. You see, if everyone is special, then no one is special. You're not special. Now, this is a shocking message. A, because it's the center of Harvard recruitment. B, it's the birthplace of helicopter parenting. And C, from what I've gathered, there's a few Jews in Newton as well. After we take a deep breath and we get our senses and our bearings, you can hear bits and pieces of this message that are true, right? Everyone can't be the Kohen, and everyone can't be valedictorian, and everyone can't be quarterback and president of the United States or even go to Harvard. Take a deep breath, boobies, zadies, right? Not every one of our grandchildren could or should or will become doctors, right? McCullough is right. Not every one of us or our children or grandchildren can occupy the top rung of the ladder, nor should they. And that's the central message of our Torah and today's Torah reading. We just finished a book of the Torah. It's not the final book. We haven't concluded the Torah. We finished the book of Numbers, Bamidbar. In my opinion, Bamidbar is the most important text in the entirety of the Torah, because Numbers is about how to survive in the desert then, the desert now, the desert of life whenever we live. It begins by saying, and the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after they came out of the land of Egypt, saying, Se'u ed rosh kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Take a census of who? Of the entirety of B'nai Yisrael, of the children of Israel. How do you survive in the desert? You begin not by appointing Kohanim, not by establishing med schools or sending your little Israelites off to an Ivy League school. How do you begin? You begin by counting Kol Adat B'nai Yisrael, by every counting every child of Israel, the smart ones and not the smart ones, right? Not just the athletic ones, not just the pretty ones or the skinny ones or the one that fit it, you fill in the blank, right? Because every society has their expectations and their images of perfect. Kol adat b'nei Yisrael, all of our children have a place under our tent. We all have a role to play. We all have a ladder to climb. We all have a function and a purpose to fulfill. And that is the message of Bamidbar, Numbers. Because when you read through it, you see so many divisions of camp and labor. You see the sons of Gershon have their role, the sons of Kohat their role, the sons of Merari their role. You have the 12 tribes of Gad and Asher and Levi. You have the Kohanim. You have the Levites. You have the Israelites. So many groups, so many names, so many divisions, tribes, so many functions, so many purposes, and that's the point. Each of us has a purpose. Each of us has a ladder. Each of us has a Shem, as we say in Hebrew. Each of us has a unique, distinct name. And that's what we're doing here, to figure out what is our name, what is my name, what is your name, and to live out our name. Because when we don't live out our identity, when we don't live out our name, we wreak havoc upon our families, upon our communities, and upon the world. And when you read the Torah, especially Genesis and into Exodus, you see the destruction caused, not by Pharaoh, not by any external threat, but by individuals not living out their name. Look at Jacob. Or what's his name mean in Hebrew? Ekev. Means the heel. It's not exactly the most beautiful name. Why did he get his name? How did he get his name? Because even in his mother's womb, he wanted to be his brother. And he grows up and he dresses like his brother, and he tries to talk like his brother, and steals his brother's blessing and the birthright, and wreaks havoc upon his family to the point where he has to run away from home. It isn't until later, when he grows up, he realizes his own identity, his own purpose, climbs his own ladder, and becomes Yisrael, his true name. And then you have Joseph. Joseph was second in command of the entire land. Joseph was powerful, and he had climbed the ladder of success only to get to the top, as a quote says, and find out it was leaning against the wrong wall. He's powerful, but he's lonely. He's lost his identity. When you read about Joseph later on, you read about a man who dresses like an Egyptian, I guess walks like an Egyptian, talks like an Egyptian, names his children Ephraim and Manasseh, Egyptian names. He is so far removed from the man he once was that his brothers don't even recognize him, and there is a loneliness and a pain and a suffering until Joseph finally comes out and says, I am Joseph, I am your brother. And then there's today, I think the most tragic reading in the entire Torah, and it's tragedy compounded. It's tragic, as I've shared in the past, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. I think it's tragic anytime a father wants to offer up his son as a sacrifice. I think it's tragic, and it speaks for itself, because father and son never speak again after this moment. But the real tragedy is when Abraham is dead and gone, and Isaac can't move on. Why? Because he's in his father's shadow. Abraham was larger than life. He was a visionary, Lech Lecha. He was the father of Harmon, of a great nation. That's not who Isaac ever was. Isaac was always behind his father, a supporting role, not a leading role, and that was just fine. Except for Isaac either felt like he had to be his father, or was pushed into being his father, tried for his whole life to walk in his father's footsteps. And we read, and Isaac dug again the wells of water, which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father. But the Philistines had stopped up these wells after Abraham's death. And so what did Isaac do? He spent his life walking the desert in his father's footsteps, redigging his father's wells, not his own wells, giving the names that his father gave to these wells, not creating his own names. It's ironic, and it's sad, and it's tragic, because Isaac, Yitzchak, means laughter, and this is a boy and a man who has none. Because when we live out somebody else's destiny, when we climb somebody else's ladder, when we live out somebody else's name, we have no laughter, we have no joy. David McCullough was right. All our kids cannot be Abraham. Everyone can't be a visionary or lead actor, cream of the crop, a number one, top of the heap, right? Not everyone can be Abraham. But just because we aren't Abraham, just because we aren't Ivy League, just because we aren't med school bound or top rung of our profession, just because we're Isaac and not Abraham, doesn't mean we aren't special. Colleague and friend of mine, Rabbi Mark Baker, gave the Jewish version of this talk at the Jewish high school, Gann Academy, and the Jewish message is similar but different. Rabbi Baker reminds us of a Mishnah, a very important Mishnah, that says, why was Adam created singly? To show the greatness of God. A human being stamps out coins and each one looks the same. But God, the King of Kings, takes one blueprint and turns it into distinct individuals. None of us come out the same. It's miraculous that nobody has ever had your fingerprint. Nobody has ever had it. Nobody ever will have it. Your fingerprint is uniquely yours, and Judaism would say each of us has a soul print that is ours and ours alone. The Talmud says each of us is an olam katan, a world unto ourself, and that nobody can walk our path, can fill our shoes. Nobody is here to play our part. Everyone has a unique ladder to climb. It may not be an academic ladder that they climb. It may not be an athletic ladder that they climb. It may not be a professional ladder, but they must climb. We do climb. We all should be encouraged to climb a ladder that is uniquely yours, that is uniquely mine. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal, says, every entity loses its spark as long as it's not fulfilling its purpose. And I would just add, every child loses their spark as long as they're not fulfilling their purpose. Just like in the Torah, great suffering comes when children are living out somebody else's spark, when they're pushed into somebody else's dreams, when they are climbing ladders for somebody else, climbing ladders that aren't their own. In this day and age, it is really difficult for kids not to feel pushed up certain ladders of professional, academic success, of fame, of fortune, of celebrity. Just ask a kid today, what do they want to be when they grow up? I ask the question all the time, and I get more often than not, famous, I want to be rich, and then they fill in the blank of how to get there. But that isn't exactly a soul's calling. Those may be byproducts of a particular profession or a particular path, but nobody sets out, or nobody should set out, to simply achieve fortune and fame and celebrity. And celebrity, speaking of which, I don't know if you knew this, maybe it was a well-kept secret, but Adam Sandler was in town. Did you know this? I just found this out on Facebook like a month before he came, as grown-ups too took this little community by storm, right? And I followed Facebook, friends of mine, posting, reposting Adam Sandler sightings and Adam Sandler signings, grown men and women. You know who you are. The good sense and dignity knocked out of them for just a little bit. 3 people came up to me on separate occasions with iPhone pictures wanting to convince me that the blurry image was Adam Sandler with their arm around them. One of them tried to make me believe that the elbow, a blurry elbow, somehow was Adam Sandler's, A, and B, even if it was, what is this rabbi going to do with that? Kfel, right? Nobody came up to me with a picture of them and Kevin James, them and Steve Buscemi, Kevin Royce, or Tim Meadows. Who? Exactly. Because only leading actors in our society get the praise. Supporting actors and actresses at best, we greet with a tepid response. Nobody came up to me with an autograph of John Larson. You know who John Larson was? No, you don't know, and you never will, because he was on the set. He was head of air conditioning to make sure that all of the tents were air conditioned properly. And frankly, the John Larsons in our society will never be signing autographs because we are obsessed with celebrity, and we are obsessed with the winners, and we are obsessed with the best of the best. We are pushing our kids up the wrong ladders, down the wrong path to fulfill other people's names and other people's identities. And that, my friends, is a crying shame. We do it as a society. The Jewish community does it really well, pushing kids into ideas of what it means to be a successful human being, not just a successful Jew. You don't have to have letters after your name to be a successful Jew. There are all kinds of ways, all kinds of paths, all kinds of names. We don't even realize it, and I'm a parent, and I'm in it with you, right? We don't realize it, but we convey it. We convey it verbally. We convey it non-verbally. We say it in so many subtle or not so subtle ways. But the truth is, some of our kids are going to Harvard. Some are going to UMass or Salem State or, God forbid, the University of Kansas, right? That's where I went. As a teacher of mine, Dennis Prager, said, we're a little obsessed with undergraduate programs in these days. I mean, think about this. Do you know where your doctor got his undergraduate degree, or your lawyer got his undergraduate or her undergraduate degree, or your dentist or your rabbi? I guess now you do. Do you really care? Would that have affected your choice of rabbis if I would have put it on the resume and not had to forge and put Harvard? Right? You wouldn't have cared. You just care if they're good, if they're competent, maybe what med school or law school they go to. But undergraduate is becoming an obsession. It's important. Good schools are important. Some of our kids will go to elite schools. Some will go to good, but not elite schools. Some will go to fine schools, but not great schools. And you know what? That's all right. Some of our kids need different types of schooling. Some of our kids are called to go to art school or technical training school. Some of them, at least statistically, 10% of them, don't strike me down in the synagogue for saying this, God, will not be going to college. And that's all right too. Contrary to popular belief, every child has their way. There is not one mold that fits everybody at all times, all children then and now. Martin Luther King Jr. said, if a man or woman is called to be a street sweeper, they should sweep the streets even as Michelangelo painted, or as Beethoven composed music, or Shakespeare wrote poetry. He should sweep the streets so well that all the hosts in heaven and earth will pause to say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job, who did her job well. You know how many lawyers I talk to who went to law school or intend on becoming a lawyer, but they wanted to be an English teacher, wanted to be a sculptor, wanted to be a social worker, but they didn't know what else to do, or they were told by society or by their community or by their parents, go to law school? For some, it is a calling. For some, it's their name. For some, it's a curse. There are no lawyer jokes here. We need lawyers. Thank God for lawyers. Some of my best friends are lawyers. But we need others to uphold the law and serve and protect in different ways. My friends, we Jews need to send some of our children to be firefighters and paramedics and police officers. And yes, we need some of our Jewish children to grow up and serve in the military too. There is no more noble or important role in this world, in this day and age, than Jewish men and Jewish women doing our part, serving in the United States Armed Forces. And we should kfel when our grandson or our granddaughter or our son or our daughter says that they have been called to serve. If it is their calling, if it is their ladder, if it is their spark, if it is their name, they should be encouraged to climb it. They should be encouraged to soar just as far as they were meant to fly. We need doctors and we need nurses and we need Reiki practitioners and massage therapists and chiropractors. A friend of mine shared that he is a nurse, and he shared that being a male nurse is not easy. And he said, you can't believe, Baruch, how many times family or friends will say, is this a stepping stone, right, to med school? Did you not get into med school? As if being a nurse or in a secondary supporting role is not enough. That's his spark. That's his calling. That's why he is here. Some of us will be CEOs. Some of our kids will be IT specialists or administrative assistants, or yes, proud and joyful and masterful janitors too. Like the janitorial staff here at Congregation Shirat Hayam, they are holy and they do their job exceedingly well. Robert, Gus, Aradanya, and the others, when you see them around here, thank them because they are mission critical. They make what I do possible. They make being in this room today possible. They make God's Torah felt in this community and beyond possible. They do their jobs well. Gus cares for this space like Michelangelo cared for art. And Aradanya cleans this space like Beethoven strummed the ivories, and Robert prepares Shabbat lunch like Shakespeare crafted plays. They do it so well that all of the hosts of heaven and earth will pause to say, here lived a great man and a great woman who did their job well, who lived out their purpose, who fulfilled their duty, who lived out their name. Let me tell you about a man named Charles Plum. He flew jet fighters in Vietnam, and he was shot down, and he parachuted to safety. He spent 6 years behind in an enemy prison, but he was eventually released, and he went on the speaking circuit. And one day he was in a restaurant, and a man came up and shook his hand, just so excited, and said, "You're Charles Plum." The man, Charles Plum, said, "How do you know me?" He said, "I was on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk when you were shot down, and I packed your parachute. I guess it worked." Plum thought about it, what this man might have looked like in his Navy uniform, what his life might have been like. He says, "I thought about the many hours the sailor had spent on a long wooden table in the bowels of the ship, carefully weaving shrouds, folding silks, each chute holding in his hands my life." Yes, we need lawyers, but we need law enforcement professionals. We need doctors and nurses. We need students and soldiers, CEO and janitorial staff. We need leading actors and supporting actresses. We need some of our children to grow up and be fighter pilots, and we need some of our children to grow up and pack other people's parachutes as well. None of us have one role. Don't think for a second we do. The great surgeon in his operating room, her operating room, who elicits awe in that moment, comes to Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur services and is just another Jew in the pew. A CEO, top dog in her company, right, who elicits fear in her employees, goes home and changes diapers and just takes out the trash like the rest of us. And the rabbi, I'm talking in big ways and a big message, and I'm the big macher right here, right now, in this moment. And then, like last week, I go to the RMV and I take a number, and I'm just another schlepper standing in a long, long line. We all have many roles, and we fulfill them at different times in different ways. We are all top rung sometimes, and we are all sometimes just schleppers schlepping along. Senator Bill Bradley once attended a dinner, which he was guest speaker. The waiter set down a dish of potatoes and placed one pat of butter on them. The senator asked for an extra pat of butter. "I'm sorry, sir," said the very unyielding waiter tersely, "one pat per guest." With a combined shock of scorn, disbelief, right? Senator Bradley looked up at the formal steward and said, "Excuse me, do you know who I am? I am Senator Bill Bradley." The senator cleared his throat. "I'm a Rhodes Scholar, a former NBA star. I currently serve on the International Trade and Long-Term Growth Committee, the Debt and Deficit Reduction Committee, and I'm in charge of taxation and IRS oversight. And I'd like another pat of butter on my potatoes, and I'd like it now." The waiter took a moment, looked down at the senator, said, "Do you know who I am?" He said, "No, I have no idea who you are." And the waiter said, "I'm the one in charge of the butter." And tonight, Senator, you'll be getting one pat. Sometimes we're the guy with the title and the degrees and the letters, and sometimes we're just the guy or the gal passing out the butter. Our roles are changing. We're changing. We're all climbing different ladders, our unique ladders, discovering our unique names. Let me end with this. There's a great teaching about Zusha. We learned a little bit about Zusha yesterday. Zusha is a great man. He's pious. He's faithful. The whole world loves him, but he looks frightened one day, and his students say, "Zusha, why are you so afraid?" He says, "I found out the question God's going to ask me. They said, what possibly could frighten you, Reb Zusha? He said, I found out that God is not going to ask me, why weren't you more like Moses, leading your people to the land of Israel? Why weren't you more like Joshua, conquesting the land, taking over the land? What is the question they're going to ask you, Zusha? Reb Zusha says, God is going to one day say to me, Zusha, there was only one thing no power of heaven or earth could have prevented you from becoming. God is going to say to me, Zusha, why weren't you more like Zusha? Today is Rosh Hashanah. It's a day of reckoning to get ready for the ultimate day of reckoning. And on that day, God will not ask us, why didn't we climb our father's ladder or our mother's ladder? God will not say, why didn't we take a leading role? Why didn't we go to an Ivy League school or become a doctor or make more money, amass a fortune, study physics or poetry or art? God will simply ask us, why didn't you climb your ladder? Why didn't you live out your name? Why didn't you encourage your children or your grandchildren to fulfill their unique purpose, their unique calling, their unique spark? There was only one thing that no power of heaven and earth could ever have prevented us from becoming, and this is what God will ask us, right? Why didn't you fulfill your name, your role, your part? I'll end with this. Abraham Lincoln says, the tragedy of being human is that we are all born God's originals, and most of us die man's copy. We must tell our children and our grandchildren and everybody else's children and grandchildren, we must tell ourselves that they are special, that we are special, that we are God's original when we live out our name, when we fulfill our unique purpose, when we play, each and every one of us, our part. Shana Tova.